we had meetings. They brought me onto the lot, and I met with Andrew Kreisberg and a couple of the guys from DC Comics and editorial. And I had seen the pilot. I'd read the first 2 episodes after that. They obviously they knew my work. They knew what I had done with that character before. They were very trusting in allowing me to take this show character version and tell whatever story I wanted to pitch them. And so I met with them. They gave me a box of scripts to take home, and I read the first 10 episodes, and I figured out where a story could slot in. And then it was just pulling the tone of the show and making sure the voice sounded show accurate, while still, I mean, it's so funny, like, people keep asking me, like, what's the difference between writing the 2 versions, like the DCU version or the TV version? And to me, they feel like the exact same character, you know, like the touchstone is always like, she's an unwavering, hopeful voice, optimistic voice in a very dark and cynical world that is always out to get her or other people. And so she embodies that helpfulness and hope, and that voice just rolls out, you know. Right. That's the goal, is to always write this comic in the voice of the show. You know, I saw that pilot a couple times early, and I thought I find Melissa to be such a great version of Supergirl that her voice, it was easy to pick up her voice as that character. By the same token, I had a lot of practice writing Supergirl as a character because I'd done it for 3 years before this. And so it was easy to slip into that mindset and bring that character back, because it's Supergirl's honestly the character I'm most comfortable writing, because her voice just spills out. Like, it's easy to me, and maybe it's not easy to the next guy, and maybe it's a struggle for some, but like, I can write her in almost any situation and feel like, well, that's the right version.
Right. You know what she would do.
I know how she's going to react. I mean, but in the comics, you know, like the TV show, you know, it's unpredictable and they do their own thing. But to me, like, if you gave me a scenario, I could tell you how I think she would react, because I've been practicing this for so long. Like, it's almost second nature to me to write it in that voice and write. You know, I'm really glad they let me do character captions, first-person captions, because there was a talk for a while, like, should we do captions or not? Because the show doesn't do voiceover. But to me, successful Supergirl stories have that voiceover, because that voice, you can counterpoint what you're seeing on screen, or you can have her thinking through a problem in a way that you might not anticipate. Like, one of the things we did in Chapter 2 was thinking about wind resistance and about the impact of catching a human being, the impact on them physically. Yes. And so there's a whole sequence where she's trying to think through, okay, the airspeed velocity.
Yeah, she's calculating it.
A body is falling through space.
Right.
I'm moving through space self-propelled. What speed do I have to match? What does this weigh? What will slamming against me in the air as I push against it do to that? Will it crush the helicopter? How do I counter that? How do I move at the same speed as it and slow it down to the point where? And so I wrote all that stuff as a first-person narrative in 3 panels as she's swooping and catching and pushing back, because captions allow you to do that, and they allow you to expand those moments in a way that you wouldn't do on TV. You know, like, that's always the goal, is can we offer things that the TV show does not offer?
Exactly.
And to me, that voice, those internal captions and narration, that's what I feel we can really offer, and do it hopefully well, to the best of our abilities, in a way that the show can't do, because they have 40 minutes and they're, you know, cranking along trying to get special effects in there and like all that stuff. But like, we can take our time and tell stories like this differently. It took a lot. I've been trying to figure out a motto for Supergirl as long as I've been involved in that character. So since 2008, how do you do better than truth, justice, and the American way? Right? Like, that bar is set, and that bar is set high, and everyone knows, like, between that and Up, Up, and Away, those are the 2 phrases you associate with Superman, right? Or maybe faster than a speeding bullet or whatever. Supergirl didn't have that. And there was a period where we were doing Truth, Justice in the Kryptonian way, and that always stuck me. Like, I always felt like that was a strange choice we made, because what the hell is the Kryptonian way? What does that mean? And so that's a very alien concept that we're interjecting into Superman's very all-American slogan. And so for me, it was, let's find a motto that works for Supergirl, and let's make sure it embodies a different spirit than Superman's logo, like, and make sure it embodies values that anyone can latch on to. And so we got all the way to the end of this Adventures of Supergirl story, and I realized I hadn't come up with a new motto yet, and it was one of the things that I really wanted to do in this story. And so it was always going to be about hope, and it was always going to be about her helping people. And I wrote those on a sheet of paper, but I didn't have the kicker, you know, like I didn't have the American way, because, like, again, it's hard to top Truth, Justice, the American way. So hope, help, and then we went through 100 variations of the kicker. And I called one of my friends and I ran through the whole list, and I said, what do you think of any of those? And she goes, they all suck. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll keep working.
And are you trying to keep it in the same tone?
The same meter, like meter. Blah, 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 blah. Like, so that becomes its own challenge, right? Like, and eventually, and it's one more extra syllable than Truth, Justice, the American way, but eventually we landed on hope, help, and compassion for all. Because I think that A, is a great motto for any superhero. B, one of the main things that we tend to bring up when we talk about Supergirl is her compassion for others. And Truth, Justice, and the American way can sound very judgy, right? Because what does that mean in modern America? Like, what does justice mean? Is the justice system working? Is it bad? Like, but hope, help, and compassion for all is something that I feel like anyone can get behind and believe in, because it has to do with how you relate to people, and it has to do with what we hope people have for others. And so, again, it took a long time and a lot of variations, and we eventually got to that. And I put it on the paper and I said, that's it. I sincerely hope that it shows up in other places, because that's one of the things you always hope, is that your work lives on past you, right? And I talked to Jamal Igle about this a lot. Like, it's so surreal to see a show that seems tonally in line with what we were doing 8 years ago now. Because it means, what it means to us is that someone noticed what we were doing back then, and they liked that tone and liked that take, and now it's going into season 2. It feels a lot like what we were doing, especially when Bizarro Girl shows up and Reactron shows up, and like it feels like someone noticed. And with hope, help, compassion for all, like, I hope and pray that phrase lives on, because I genuinely think it is, and I've spent literally years thinking about this, I genuinely think it is the best version of a model for that character. And that's self-serving, and that's very self-serving to say, but, like, again, we wrestled with this. Like, it wasn't an easy, it's not like I dashed it off and I'm like, that's it, and sent it in. Like, we spent days and days talking through this, trying to find the best option, on top of the years I've been working on this character, trying to figure out, like, what phrase can perfectly embody, how do you distill someone, an iconic giant character, into 3 words, or 3 words in a phrase. And it took a long time, and I'm so happy that we have a new motto for her, and that, again, hopefully it'll live on past us. Elements that we did.
That you've done.
You know, it's interesting. We developed Lana Lang to act as an older sister, basically, for Supergirl. And on the show, they have Kyler as Alex Danvers, and she's amazing. But it really feels like they saw how well Supergirl interacts with an older sister, and I think that subconsciously helped them come up with Alex. But overall, I mean, like, every week I watch with just a smile on my face, because, like, I can't believe they're making a Supergirl show, you know? It's surreal. It's very surreal. And walking around Comic-Con, everyone has Supergirl bags, and it's like, if you told me 8 years ago that this job I was doing like was going to spill out, not to say that I'm the only guy that's ever worked on this property, but it's so bizarre and surreal that character has a bigger fandom than ever before. Because when Jamal and I worked on Supergirl, there were 5 people that were really excited about us, and then, you know, everyone saw her as a second-tier character, and we worked really hard to raise her up into an upper tier, and New Krypton really helped for that, because it was a very visible story that we could do stuff with. And then, you know, you watch the show and like Lucy Lane shows up, and she's the career military woman we made her in the books.
There's a shot of her in her outfit.
Yeah, and you can put it right next to Jamal's drawings. Yeah.
Wow.
Supergirl versus Cat Grant was a thing we introduced that no one had ever done before. Like Cat Grant had never been in a Supergirl book before.
Right.
Stuff like that like already has been embedded into the show, and it's like, well, I don't know a good answer to your question, because I already feel like the things that I love about what Jamal and I did, like they've already put in the show, and part of it's the show engine, you know, that Cat Grant thing, like it's the engine of a lot of story for them. So
I think
I mean, like, I have a list of stuff I'd love to see Superwoman with the cowl and the hood. Like, I'd love to see Superwoman. Like, I really think that's an Alex Ross design. I really think that would pop on screen and just be incredible. And I'd love to see Jenna as Superwoman fighting Supergirl. Like, I think that'd be amazing. But that's like a Christmas list, you know? Like, that's stuff that I hope and pray shows up. But they're already doing such an amazing job, and they're doing such a cool TV show. Like, I'm happy every week, and every week there's some special effects sequence that blows me away. You know, she caught a nuclear missile,
I know, right?
And I was like, okay, well, you can't top that. Like, how do you top that? And they topped it by she lifts up Fort Ross into space, and it's like, okay, can't wait for season 2. What's that gonna do? Our trade paperback. Some good news, your readers might not know, they're reissuing Jamal and I's Supergirl stories in early September in new volumes, new designs, new covers. And then 2 weeks later, Adventures of Supergirl, the collection comes out. So September, we'll have 4 new Supergirl books in comic stores, 4 new volumes of Supergirl stuff in stores, just in time for that premiere in October. I actually don't know. I don't know. Like they tell me so little about the collected stuff. I will open my box of comps and open it, and I'll learn as I'm going through what the extras are, if any. Okay. So. Download from Comixology. Buy it in the stores, or pre-order that trade paperback. Honestly, I genuinely think the trade paperback sales will determine what happens with that series next. So if that's a huge seller for them, they're going to want to do more stories. And I was just telling Kat Staggs, who does our covers, I have an arc, the next 13 chapters, what it would be about. And I told her the climax, and her face fell, and I'm like, yeah. So like, I'm itching to tell these stories, but I don't know when or where we'll do that.
Right.
So. One of the things I love is, so when I was a kid, comics were very dude-centric, right? Like, the only people that I knew that read comics in high school was like 2 other guys, and they didn't tell anybody because they didn't want to get beat up or whatever. Which is funny because my parents owned a comic shop, and so I was like, comics are amazing! And they're like, we read them, but don't tell anybody. And that was in the early to mid 90s, right? And then suddenly you had a very initial wave of female-led books doing well. And companies said, well, we can make money doing books starring Supergirl, right? Like, there was a period where Supergirl was the #2 selling book in the comic market, right? Jeff Loeb, Mike Turner, and then Wonder Woman blew up, and now we're at a time where there's a Wonder Woman movie coming, and it's led by Patty Jenkins, who's incredible. And DC's doing things like DC Superhero Girls, which 10 to 15 years ago would have been a line of toys aimed at young boys, right? Superhero guys, and it would have been a Superman toy and a Batman toy, and like they've noticed and they're expanding what they do, and that reach is only going to continue to grow exponentially. And as other companies notice how successful, let's say DC Superhero Girls is as a line, where you've got tall figures, short action figures, a graphic novel, 2 novels are out, those lines will show people there's a demand. And companies, money talks to companies, a lot of these media companies, they'll notice and they'll start finding those voices and start producing that work for their companies. And you know, what's that phrase, like high tide floats all boats. And I really feel like one of the great things DC is doing is acknowledging, well, there are different kinds of fans. Let's make new things for them that aren't the DC Universe line, that aren't, you know, Vertigo or whatever. And DC Superhero Girls is an awesome step. And they have an animated series, and they have animated direct-to-DVD movies, and like, they are meant for young women ages 6 and up, but like, I love those animated things. Lisa Yee wrote the 2 novels that are out, superhero high novels, and they're awesome. Like, they're really charming, they're not like overly saccharine, they're really great stories about young women coming to grips with being superheroes and doing it in a very positive, empowering environment. And I honestly think like that line could lead a huge charge, and hopefully will, long term. Short term, I don't know. I've seen a lot of cool announcements the last week here, so it can only get better. But things are better now than they were 5 years ago. Well, that's the goal, right? I never want to make work where I'm like, turn that script in, life goes on. Like, when I have done that. Any freelancer will tell you I've done the work that, oh well. But like, I loved this character growing up. I want her to be successful. I want to make that happen however I can. When people do bad versions of Supergirl stories in comics, and no offense to those creators, I know what it's like to be in the trenches, but sometimes bad stories tumble out, right? And it frustrates me because you don't want to be the guy that goes to the grave that says, I told a bad Superman story, so you try really hard to tell a great Superman story. But Supergirl, sometimes people are like, whatever, it's Supergirl. I'm like, no, that's the problem. Like, you need to pour your entire being into telling stories of this character, because if you don't do it, then no one else after you will. Like, and she becomes second tier or a bad version of Superman, and that is more than she should be. And so, you know, I love that character. I grew up loving that character. I push really hard on that character. And when I see a bad Supergirl story, it pisses me off, because every Supergirl story has to be good, or else it will give permission to people after that to do bad ones. And that makes me angry. And that's true of any character, but as a Supergirl person, like, I'm very protective of that. So, well, and I've spent years of my life working on these characters. Please pre-order. You pre-order. Amazon.com.